Hello, Jon. Thank you so much for coming back to speak with us. The last video that we did got so many views. People loved it. Tons of questions. And I want to just do a quick kind of overview of who you are, what we're here for today. And of course, I'm going to let you speak to that. But just in case folks don't know who Jon is, for over 20 years, he's been a respected researcher in the UFO community and in cryptozoology. He was the principal investigator on the jaw-dropping investigation 1997 film Area 51, the alien interview that was smuggled out of an underground government facility in Nevada. When was that? In 51, Jon?
Oh, it was smuggled out in 91.
Oh, in 91. Okay,
Yeah,
right.
middle of
So,
91.
Jon, if you could just give us a quick summary of who you are, what we're here for today for folks that don't know you.
Yeah,
Take it away.
sure. Yeah, 56 years old, born and raised in the Chicago area, far northwest side of Chicago. Grew up in the Chicago in the 70s, which I think is really important to tell people who didn't live in Chicago or got Chicago TV. My friends and I, I still am friends with my grade school and high school friends, we all laugh that, we're part batshit crazy from watching Chicago TV, from the brawling wrestling that was on Sunday mornings, to a Jewish guy in front of an acorn singing Jewish songs, and we never understood why the language was weird until we were like in college. We're like, oh, it was for Jewish kids, for Captain Kangaroo. And we had another person on the Bozo the Clown Network called Fraser Thomas. He also, like Captain Kangaroo, had this military jacket with the epaulets, talking to a goose puppet. We had a program called Giggle Snorter Hotel where a guy molded clay and would talk to it and puppets. And my point is, without going on and on, is that that experience not only made me half crazy, but really expanded my mind. Like, hey, look, life is, an open book. Don't be so closed-minded. So, and I was a high school, college, and semi-pro football player, a standout in high school. I went to Memphis State, now the University of Memphis. But when I was down in Memphis State, I actually got into professional wrestling, and I did that on and off for 20 years. The peak of my career, I wrestled for the light heavyweight championship of the world on ESPN while still a junior in high school in 1990. So although that journey, I didn't make a lot of money at it, it was my lifelong dream. And I ran for Congress, Illinois governor. I was on the ballot in November as a replacement candidate for Illinois Secretary of State, and married to this wonderful woman named Joanne for 24 years. We have three beautiful children. And since the start of COVID, I, like a dingaling, decided to investigate fully journalistic, credibility, this bizarre film, a documentary from 1997 called the Area 51 Alien Interview, a film allegedly smuggled out of a facility south of Area 51 by a government whistleblower named Victor. And to investigate it, very important to simply find the truth, whatever it is. And it's 5 years later, I still have no stake in the game, meaning it doesn't matter to me. And theatrically, Hollywood talk, it's a better story if it's proven a hoax and it's a fake. It's the surprise ending. The problem is 5 years later, not one person from Hollywood, not one person from the military, not one person from ufology, not one person from special effects corridors has conclusively, with credibility, proven and shown why this film is a hoax. It's actually been the flip side where we've actually, I said this on your program, found the provenance, who allegedly was in the viewing room watching this being. The entire program project called Project Aquarius. I think that's the documentary. Forget the film. It's what I found in researching this film, the other rabbit hole, which is, the Majestic program, and then Project Aquarius, which was the acquisition, the retention, the housing, and interrogation of off-planet biological beings. So I sit here today waiting for Hollywood to put this on as a documentary, and just to let people know, because I've had people ask me, especially from your program, well, it's what do you want to give it to Hollywood for? Because the media won't pay attention to me. I mean, if this was on the New York Times, folks, I'd be semi-retired and minding my own business. The media won't touch this.
Mm.
So my next course of action was to take it to Hollywood and let them financially pay the rest of it, because I am very proud to say I have not taken a dime from any ufologist, any interested person on this journey. I've got about $20,000 of my own money invested. I'm not going to be accused of being a UFO grifter. I don't want any money from the public, and I tell people, hey, let's let Hollywood finish this off for us. Let them finish all my loose ends and let them use their money. I don't want to take $20 from some interested ufologist or somebody interested in ufology. So I'm very, very proud of that we've kept this pure as much as possible. And so I sit here today waiting for, the green light from a network to buy the documentary and start production on that. And in the meantime, came across this information about a second Roswell crash, and saw that there was a niche, saw that no one had compiled all 6 or 7 accounts of this crash. I'm not saying those accounts are accurate or truthful. I say this in the book. Here they are. So you don't have to run around and Google the St. Augustine planes or the second Roswell crash. Here is every single person in the past 75 years that has made a remark about a alleged second crash the same day of the infamous Roswell Corona crash. That's all it is. I don't make any declarative statements. We don't sway one way or the other. We let the reader decide for themselves. Another thing that I'm very proud of, we didn't want to go off into a tangent. And so we're, promoting the book now. And around the pulse, and Caroline, as you and I were talking about, Carolyn, sorry, that what has really been taking over my life is the emails, the contacts that have been coming to me in the past 5 or 6 months, especially like in the past 4 weeks. It's been like an onslaught of insiders, of people that work for the military, people that worked in these programs, people that were on the periphery of these programs, a psychiatrist, a woman who was a electrical engineer for a DARPA project. I mean, I met a CIA agent retired in a bar who had some very bizarre things. It almost ended up in a fight between her and I, like a screaming match. Get into that. Um, but for the past 4 days, I've had this gentleman who claimed to work for the DIA and Lockheed told me this bizarre story, which, if you want me to touch on later in the program, I will. But so, it's like I want to take a break and breathe, but the UFO world is not letting me. And I guess that's my fault. That's, this is the responsibility of, you want to go out there, you want to put your name out there, you want to ask for people's help. Well, here you go.
Exactly.
So, I'm trying to, again, without sounding ham-handed, without sounding Pollyanna, I just want to be credited at the end of the day for a guy that worked his ass off for the people, the interested observers of the UFO community. If that is all that I am tagged with, whether you prove the Victor video or don't prove it, or, documentary or a movie makes $70 million, I don't, that's irrelevant. I just want to know that I'm going to continue to work my butt off for people and not give up the good fight, and be truthful and honest and open,
Good.
and tell people what's going on. So
Well, your book is titled Magdalena, the Second Roswell Crash, right?
Right, correct.
So I read it, and as I said to you, it was a very compelling read. It just kind of put the evidence out there,
Yeah.
lots of pictures of well-known, reputable folks, so that you can visualize that they're real folk. Lots of sightings and accounts, and it was excellently written, very, very clear, very easy to understand. It was a good, quick read.
Thank you.
I definitely want to read it again because, I always read books that I like twice because sometimes you
Me too.
miss a few things, you
Right.
miss a
Me
few
too.
things along the way. But let's talk about your book for a minute and or longer. And let's just start with the obvious. Why did you write this book? And why hasn't this Magdalena crash site had the same notoriety as Roswell? Where is the interconnectedness between them both?
Great question. I wrote the book because I've said this on numerous podcasts and on yours. I have been forced to watch as many documentaries as possible just to get little tidbits, and it has worked tremendously for my Victor investigation. One night I'm watching UFO Hunters, a program I've seen many, many millions of times, and they start talking about a second Roswell crash. I've always heard the whisper about it, but
Mm-hmm.
never researched it or asked about it. And I credit the UFO Hunter team in my book. I mean, they pushed me over the edge like, wait a minute, and it was a very good program, but they only talked about one person's account of a alleged second crash. So I started doing my own homework. And in doing my own homework for my own interest, I found out that no one out there in the community has compiled all of these accounts. And there was about five when I started. There ended up actually being like seven when I got done with the book. Seven different people who gave you know, their uh, their statement or their belief or what they were read and briefed or what they saw about this second crash. And I said, well, geez, this is a book. If I'm trying to consolidate everything so I don't have to keep Googling and go to this page and that page, it might help someone else that's probably looking for the same, the same brevity of, hey, can somebody put this all in one book or put this all on one website? I just decided to put it in book.
That you'd go for it. So
And
let's just go to Victor for a minute because you mentioned Victor, and for folks that may have not seen the alien interview that we did, just give us a 5-minute quick summary on who is Victor, why are we hearing his name, and I guess explain why he was the driving force behind the whole thing.
yeah, 1996, Rocket Pictures offices in Beverly Hills, California gets a bizarre phone call from a gentleman who claims he is a former government employee and that he's got a 3-minute VHS tape of an alien being interviewed in an underground facility. So, being a second tier video production company, they of course said, "Yeah, come on in." They were doing like a Chevy Chase, Rodney Dangerfield golf video. I mean, this was not a very serious, I mean, this wasn't a company putting documentaries out for Nova in Nature on PBS. I'm just wanted to get that across. And they were doing like this golf video. I thought it was a Tim Conway, but I was corrected by internet warriors. It was a Chevy Chase, Rodney Dangerfield golf video. So he comes into the office via taxi cab because he doesn't drive. Um, Shows him this tape. It's bluish, grainy. It's this weird looking alien, gray alien that's tan. It doesn't have almond eyes. It's got round eyes. There's two military people in the foreshadow. Their shoulders get in the way. It's a continuous shot. There doesn't seem to be any production value, meaning a free camera shot or people not getting into the way or zooming in. It's just, let's set up the tripod and the camera and film it. Medical staff come into the room once the creature starts to, I'm sorry, don't ever want to use that. Once the being or the visitor starts to medically flag, and the medical staff is in short sleeve scrubs, and we're told by Victor that that's because it was only bio level containment 2, which is gloves, mask, and surgical caps. You didn't have to wear pressurized suits. And I think still to this day, the gist of the head scratcher of the entire video is Victor. Because to this day, I've never heard someone speak more scientifically, more intelligently than him in my life. And I've probably met 10,000 people. He to this day, his vernacular to this day defies, my logic. I don't care what PhD you have. I don't, I just, I'm blown away by people that can speak that intelligently. He also does an Art Bell radio show where unrehearsed questions, and he goes on for an hour and a half. This, people say, oh, he's an actor with a script. Well, he goes on Art Bell. The questions are not rehearsed. They don't know he doesn't know what the questions are, and he fields and combats these questions for an hour and a half, like he's a Olympic fencer. He's switchblading every question that he can't answer. And this video always bothered me, and it had a little coding on the bottom, DNI/27. And 2 years later, I'm running for Congress. I asked a senator, I've got the picture, the moment I asked him, I turned around, said, he was a Navy person. Do you know what Department of Naval Intelligence is, which is supposedly the acronym DNI? And he gave me this aggressive look, and he said, you don't need to know anything about that. And took off to the bus. And I went, and it was the start of, like, this is 99. I'm like, wait, this was a hoaxed video, supposedly. Why did it just piss off this United States senator? This is crazy. And 20 years later, at the start of COVID, I had some free time, and a director called me from Hollywood and said, do you have any ideas for cheap documentaries? It's COVID. We got to get something out real quick. And I talked about this video. He didn't want to do it. He thought it was going to be way too complicated. Boy, was he right. It's 5 years later, and we still haven't crossed every T and dotted every I. Man, you want to talk about somebody with intelligence. And I started to investigate it. And I'm here 5 years later. I'm not telling you definitively it's real and Victor is real. I am telling you face to face, my eyeballs to the camera. I have not had one person in 5 years of hard-nosed investigation come to me with any credible evidence that would pass in a courtroom to say this was a hoax.
And we
And
even had
everybody
special.
that was part of the production, from the CEO to
Yeah,
the director to a month ago, I started interviewing people from the production. They all say the same thing. We didn't film it. We didn't see it being filmed.
right.
So the question is, I mean, I know 97% of the provenance and the answer, but I'm just asking, and I'll stop. Question is, how can a retired government employee, because he was vetted, the
Right,
director vetted him, Victor. This was the director didn't say, well, show up on Wednesday. The director spent 2 weeks vetting Victor, seeing if he was a government employee and whatnot. And I've heard this from intelligence people who said, I remember a director looking for Victor. So what we're supposed to believe is that a retired government employee who didn't drive choreograph did a choreographed, coordinated video production of a animatronic being with casting and craft catering, renting the sound stage.
right.
Does that even make sense to
I
anybody?
agree.
I don't know. Maybe it does.
And we
So
even had a special effects guy on
yeah,
one of our interviews, and he
right.
had some concrete things to say, but he
Yes,
never was
yes.
able to disprove it
No,
either.
no, absolutely. And one more thing, and I'm glad you brought that up. I really, really want people who haven't heard me before to know one thing about me. I run towards the skeptics. There isn't a person that has emailed me, emailed podcasters who then emailed me. There isn't a skeptic in the world that tried to contact me that I did not run to. I mean, this Vince, this person that Carol
Yes,
Ann is talking about, with them. This guy is going to help me. Why? Because they just want to prove if it's real or not. So I don't want to dissuade experts. I want their helps when we do try and recreate this
yeah,
film. I will have the provenance and these experts to help me see if we can recreate this being to look exactly the way it did on a film. So
right.
very big tenet of my investigation. I leap, gravitate towards people who are skeptics because I want to hear what they're thinking, because that's only going to help me in my investigation.
And I can vouch for that because Vince was kind of on the attack in the beginning, and you met him with open arms and ears and eyes, and the two of you buddied up so fast. It was great.
Yeah,
It was great.
yeah.
It was, there was, I'm going to run.
People,
Of,
people, people want to see that podcast. because Carol Ann should have done a YouTube short when three Italians get together to talk about aliens. All of our hands are going and they're screaming, and yeah,
That's a good idea.
it was classic, classic, great theater.
That was great. That was
It was
great.
awesome.
Yeah, I spoke to
Awesome.
him not long ago. He's a great dude. Really, really
Great
good.
guy, great
So
guy.
let's make sense out of Roswell and Magdalena, and
Yeah,
let's talk about time frames and let people get like some kind of grasp on like the demographics, the time frames between the two, and then we'll talk about the rest of the book, what you think happened and what some of the
yeah.
possibilities are.
It's end of June 1947. There is horrendous lightning storms all over New Mexico, and we talk about that in detail. But it was at the end of June that an Air Forceman, airman named Tom Carey, and a couple of other Air Force personnel at Roswell, at a corner of the base, saw three objects in the air. And it's important to first put down on the chalkboard, three objects witnessed end of June, because this is important, because this story is crazier than the Victor story. This story is more convoluted and crazier than Roswell. I mean that. Maybe it doesn't have the gravity of it, because we don't have 700 witnesses like in Roswell, but this story has more twists and turns than a Formula One track. So a couple of days later, the storms start to intensify as New Mexico starts preparing for the 4th of July. And on the West Coast, a United Airline pilot, Emil Smith, United Airlines, flying through the same thunderstorm that encompassed the West, sees an array of objects. Now, it wasn't two, it was more. Some people claim that was three. He described it as an array of flying objects that completely mystified this seasoned United Airlines captain. And so we go to allegedly, the storm intensifies on July 4th. And it was July 5th that Max Brazel decides to take a ride along his ranch and some portions of his ranch because he heard, hellacious thunderstorms. And Max comes across this debris field. And we all know the story. He, collects it, takes it to the sheriff. The sheriff then calls the Roswell Army Airfield. I'm very careful to say that because I was proud that in the beginning, I used Wright Field, not Wright Patterson, because it wasn't called Wright Patterson in 47. So I became a stickler of like, so, internet warriors don't, like, you don't know what you're talking about. So Roswell Army Airfield, because there was no Air Force back then, even though I used Tom Carey, was in the Air Force, but he was in the Army Air Corps is what it was called. And so the material is taken there. They they get a notification that there's another crash site with the craft with bodies, and another team is sent out to retrieve that. The craft is brought back, or the debris. It's sent to Fort Worth. One being was alive. That being was sent to Kirkland Airfield, then sent to Los Alamos, the only kind of biological retention facility, so on and so forth, back in 1947. God only knows what they were studying. And Walter Haut releases a report. Yeah, I know I'm skipping things, but we're not talking about Roswell. Releases a report to the media. The Army has, captured a flying saucer, a disc, and a day later, that's retracted. It's a flying balloon. Jesse Marcel is in a room with balloon wreckage, and the whole thing is squashed and fades into obscurity until Stanton Friedman gets wind of this in the late 70s and starts to, I like to use the word, reconstitute the dry powder of Roswell in that story. And he brings it back into the consciousness of America. And people start researching the entire Roswell, and a branch starts researching a couple of guys, one who I became incredibly close with, Donald Schmidt and Kevin Randall. And you find this story that this gentleman who worked for the U.S. Soil Conservation. So he went out, he helped farmers on behalf of the government to improve their crop production, what new things and new techniques are being used, and uh, a really good positive government and program. If you, if you want me, he was very well liked and respected. Somebody that deals with farmers successfully, Carol Ann, you kind of, that kind of gives you a little bit of an indication that they're probably, a straight shooter. Comes up with this crazy, bizarre story, and I'm paraphrasing. His name was L. Grady Barney Barnett, and he said he was driving on the St. Augusta Plains. So if Roswell and Corona are on the east, there is the Luera Mountains, and then the St. Augustine Plains. Okay, and then you go towards the west, like California and other states and whatnot. Said he was driving on the St. Augustine Plains, and a metallic object was shimmering and caught his attention off the highway. And he pulled off the highway, and he approaches his story, approaches this craft. There is bizarre metal fragments all over the place, common theme, which we've heard. There were 4 beings that were dead. And as he came upon this craft, a team of alleged archaeologists, whether that was the professor, the teacher, students, people getting their PhDs, he was loosely termed a team of archaeologists, also came upon this wreckage. And he said within a blink of an eye, Army personnel, led by a 1947 a car with Army personnel and higher ups in it, approached and started to cordon off the area, screaming, warning the archaeology students and Barney himself that, you go back to your, cars on the road. You are to forget about this. They said they went back on to the road, and it was like a disaster scene. More military vehicles and apparatuses. He described a back like a back a tow truck type device from the Army, obviously to pick up the craft is what it would be. And so Don Schmidt and Kevin Randall, the first story out of the gate starts the crazy train. So everyone believes the story, including Stanton Friedman, very important. Come to find out, somebody finds his wife's diary, or was given his wife's diary, or talks to Barney's wife. He was detailing everything like, we went to A&P. That's a store back from the 60s and 50s, folks. We went to the A&P, we bought a dozen eggs and a gallon of milk. I mean, really detailed diary. In her diary, she was with Barney all day. Doesn't mention a UFO crash. So right away, it's the, hop on the crazy train. Here is this supposed salt of the earth government employee, a person that interacts with farmers,
Right.
and he's lying completely. Apparently, to his wife, he is. So the UFO researchers at the time kind of do a shoulder shrug, and like, what is this? And it's like, and forgive me for being glib, and this is the way I communicate. So to me, it was almost like a stage show, and it was like, some lady in a headset going backstage, going, okay, next, who's next on the crazy train of Magdalena? And so here comes Gerald Anderson. I believe he was in his 30s or 40s. He tells a story back in the early 90s that he was with his father and uncle and family members, and they came across a craft in beans on the plains of St. Augustine. They also encountered a group of archaeologists. Gerald Anderson goes into great detail about the being. He goes under hypnotic regression. He talks about what the being looked like. He had somebody sketch out what the being looked like, a typical gray with a flight suit. And he says that he remembers one of the names of the archaeologist group, a Professor Bursick. And I'm chopping that, but just go along with me here. It's been a long day. Bursick, Bursik, Bursik, Busk. So Randall and Schmidt start researching this. Lo and behold, there's an archaeology teacher at Gerald Anderson's high school named Busick. They go ask him. Gerald Anderson was never in my class. I was never with him on the St. Augustine Plains. I don't know what he's talking about. Now he refuses to give up his transcripts. He starts telling a story that he once was a Navy SEAL or in special operations. You can write the rest of this story. But this guy goes on camera for an hour and a half and talks about a detailed story in hypnotic regression, um, talks about the being, whether that's true or not. So, can you imagine me? I'm like, well, I'm nowhere closer than I was 3 weeks ago when I started investigating this. And I'm just going over my notes. So now a really convoluted story happened. So here it is. We have an alleged crash, not Corona Roswell, other side of the Lower Air Mountains in an area called the St. Augustine Plains. This is just west of Datil, Dati, Mexico, New Mexico, and the larger town, Magdalena, which people in the intelligence community refer to this crash as the Magdalena crash. Hence the name of my book, just because it was the largest town closest to the crash, if that makes sense. Makes sense to me. So now, in the kind of the same time frame that Schmidt and Randall are investigating this crazy Gerald Anderson, Barney Barnett story, a guy comes forward, Jim Ragsdale, and you're not going to believe this.
This was very
Claims,
compelling.
so, and this is the part where I get tongue tied. I mean, I have so many. This guy made me Looney Tunes just reading his account. So I'm going to try and get this straight. So Jim Ragsdale, I'm still not clear whether he was married at the time, is with Trudy Truelove. Folks, I'm not making this up. This is like a dime store detective novel. And they at first were in his pickup truck. And he says that the night of the crash, that he was naked with Trudy Truelove. They were making love in the back of their pickup truck. They were completely naked when this meteor or streak across the sky went right over them and crashed just over the rise, a half a mile from them. They were shocked, but they thought it was possibly a meteor. They stayed there all night. And in the morning, kind of following what Barney Barnett and Anderson are saying, and in the morning, they go over the ridge in their pickup truck. Important to understand that. So they traverse in a pickup truck over the ridge and they see this shiny metallic craft again, metallic shards laying all over the place. The army is there. There are other civilians there that he doesn't know who they are, and they lay out of sight. And he just says the same thing. It's screaming. It's you go over here. They're cording it off. And he said that 10 vehicles showed up, army vehicles showed up, and they fantailed out. And they spent for as long as Jim Ragsdale was there, they spent the time, collecting and sifting through the sand and whatnot. So he says that at this time it was 40 miles of northwest of Roswell. Well, they start to a very intrepid reporter named Philip Barrett, who I acknowledge in the beginning of my book, starts to really do detective work the phones, go out, come shoot detective, knocking on doors, talking to witnesses, I know, shocking, ufologists that just want to be on a computer, talking to people who actually own this property. And there was about 3 or 4 different people who were subdivided, who owned this alleged crash site property. And all of these people, I've got a couple of their names: Dorothy Epps, a Bill Edgar, who was a farmhand. Um, all of them, all 3 or 4 of them, the Cox family, they all said the same thing. There was nothing crash. There was no army people. There's no depression in the ground. A couple of them had said that they were out there 4 days later. It was meticulous, but interesting. One of them said you can't get there via a pickup truck. You have to. The only way this was validated by other people that own parts of this property, of this ranch. The only way to really get to this area from the east was on horseback. Now the government obviously must have taken another route, because Ragsdale said there was multitude of vehicles, kind of reaffirming the Barnett story. So now Ragsdale's daughter has him do an affidavit. She kind of takes over as his mouthpiece. He's dying of cancer. Ragsdale's wife said, I've never heard of Jim talk about this. Well, he had an affair with Trudy Trulop. Wait, what? Was this before me? Was this after me? Now he tells Randall and Schmidt that it wasn't a pickup truck, that it was an Army Jeep he used. And the story, again, like Barnett, like Anderson, I'm not laying blame at them, but the story starts to unravel. He can't remember this. He won't validate that. Oh, so much to the point where Barnett or another reporter contacts Kevin Randall in England while he was doing a conference or something, and said, look, the story is this, now it's this. Now the wife said she never heard anything. Now the wife saying that one time when he was drunk, he mentioned something to his friend. He overheard it. And, well, if you're overhearing your husband having an affair, why did you not confront him? I mean, it's just a completely convoluted story. And when Kevin Randall was asked, and kind of confronted with all of these misconceptions and misinterpretations and things that just didn't add up and were not, cohesive, um, Randall said, we just don't think he's very truthful. Now, being the intrepid reporter that I think I would like to be, or be known as eventually, taking the Barrett, the Barrett, keep following the sources, I talked to Donald Schmidt, and I said, tell me, my brain's fried. Just tell me the end result of the Ragsdale story. And Don Schmidt, who I refer to as my Uncle Don, said that, look, I believe that they came across a crash of a plane and not beings. And that's what I believe. I do not believe that he saw a crash of a UFO or an off-planet vehicle. So, so right now at that point, I've got I'm rubbing my temples, going, "Oh God, don't go on anymore, please, John." So now I've got all of these crazy stories, and I find a book that was written by a United States Air Force counterintelligence agent. I know, counterintelligence. His name was Colonel Richard French. He wrote a book in the 2008s or 10s, I believe. And verified Air Force pilot, verified counterintelligence, little shaky because he came out years earlier that there was underwater UFOs, which are really being kind of proven now, or really being talked about. So how crazy was he back in 2000s talking about underwater vehicle, extraterrestrial vehicles? So here's his story. Follow this bouncing ball. He claims that the craft, one of the crafts, was brought down. It was not the electrical storm, but that it was a pulse weapon attached to an experimental airplane from Los Alamos. Now, Los Alamos, that whole complex was only about 70 miles from St. Augustine, about 110 from Roswell. If I'm wrong on that, I'm sorry, but general area. So this is not far-fetched. It's not like it came from Holloman Air Force Base, or it came from Coronado or San Diego, or, from Texas, Texas Air Force, Army Air Corps a base, that this experimental aircraft developed at Los Alamos had an experimental pulse weapon, which was shot at the craft in late June, early July. Remember that. Remember late June, early July. That this pulse weapon was shot at this craft. It disabled his avionics, and that is why this alleged second craft crashed. Okay. how do we go about this one? Now I find in the Huffington Post article a man that I attempted to interview for the Victor story. And that interview went sideways real fast. I was 55 years old and I was hollered at by another adult male. So there was a really uncomfortable moment in my life. But I take it all to my blame. I just rushed him with questions. And his name is Colonel John Alexander. I think many UFO people know him. He's famed in the UFO world for conferences. He was part of a very clandestine group. And he also worked on propulsion, and he also worked on lasers and radar applications and all kinds of black projects that would surround UFOs or experimental aircraft. And he emphatically said that Colonel French is crazy. That there's no way, absolutely no way in 1947 that a pulse weapon was developed and developed to the point where it would actually shoot down an extraterrestrial craft that was 10,000 years advanced, more advanced than what was on planet Earth. So here is this. And then he goes on to say that, well, I was part of trying to develop something like that, but that wasn't this, that was in the 60s. So he doesn't poo it outright. He actually comes back with no, it's not a crazy story. We tried to do it in the 60s. He goes, but I'm telling you, that story is crazy. It never happened in 1947. We had absolutely no capability to do this. So I am talking with Stephen Greer, who's been instrumental in the Victor investigation, just for his knowledge of how many people he has interviewed, his knowledge of facilities, of coding, of nomenclature, you name it. He's just been wonderful. And I'm telling him about the book, and I'm telling him about Colonel French. He said, well, I don't think I think Colonel Alexander might be wrong. I'm like, what? What? Please unpack this for me. So Dr. Greer starts to tell a story that he has told on numerous podcasts where three Roswell personnel who witnessed or touched or was part of the cover up and the craft and the retrieval, you name it, told Dr. Stephen Greer that no, we launched this bizarre. They told him it was a radar type application pulse weapon, that that the radar was turned on. This wasn't actually an aggressive, like I forget the military term. It wasn't an actual weapon. It was simply a high advanced radar system. And it's when they turned on this radar system, that is what they think interfered with one of the craft and caused its crash. So we have like these two stories of some kind of man-made electronic disturbance, as I call it. I think that is a good way to put those two, Colonel French and the Greer airmen in one kind of compartment that, possibly that a man-made electronic disturbance caused one of these crashes. Then I think, which is the linchpin, I talked to Richard Doty, former counterintelligence, U.S. Air Force. When you're in counterintelligence, one thing for sure, you are briefed on almost everything that the government wants you to investigate or to be part of. I mean, you have to be told the story, shown the story, the documents, the film. And coincidentally, Richard Doty tells this story to Dr. Greer. And he then, I'm going to tell that story first. So he basically tells Dr. Greer, coincidentally, which is funny, that yes, a second craft crashed. And I was shown the 16 millimeter film as part of a wide package of crash retrieval that started with the 47 Roswell crash. And he said, here is the story. It wasn't until 2 years later that crash scene was brought upon, that the Army found this crash scene and came upon it and retrieved it. It wasn't until 1949, because of the remoteness in the Luera Mountains, not the St. Augustine Plains. It was at the base of the Luera Mountains. Shows me a satellite photo. It's bizarre of the ground. You see the ridge line. Okay. Now, Doty disagreed with me. I think I'm right. You see the ridge line, okay, of this plateau, but about 40 feet, you don't see a line in the sand, Caroline, like some bulldozer, you know,
Oh, wow.
moved the ridge to it's so it's I was, you know, I was not yelling, but I'm like, Rick, there's no line there for like 40 feet. Like some mechanical device pushed the dirt somewhere or the sand somewhere. It's so obvious. And so he said, look, I'm just about had it with the UFO community. I was briefed on this. I saw the 16 millimeter film of the Roswell bodies in a tent, the flight systems from the craft. He said, I'm briefed on the 1940 Magdalena crash. People are telling me that I don't know what I'm talking about. So I go back to Doty. And so I said, look, could you write me in black and white exactly what happened? And this is Doty's testimony. 1949. Now, think think about all the other stories I just told you and how maybe they were woven in to the legit, maybe the legit story. And I'm not saying Doty's a liar. I just don't want to make any assertions because that's not what the purpose of this book is. This book is just to say, here it is, folks, you take it. Doty says in 1949, um, a rancher who moved his cattle to a higher part of the Luera Mountains comes upon this crash. He contacts the sheriff of the county. The sheriff doesn't get there for 5 days. The sheriff takes pictures, notes, contacts the Roswell Army Airfield. They don't respond for 20 days. Now,
Wow.
this crash with bodies has been there for 2 years. 20 days later, personnel and equipment show up from the Roswell Army Airfield, and I'm missing one part of the. I'm sorry. I have so much stuff going in my head. A team of archaeologists from New Mexico State University came upon the crash also, and that's who contacted the sheriff. So it was the rancher and these archaeologists, like the same thing again, like meeting at the same crash site. And there's another person that says no, they were from the University of Pennsylvania, the archaeologists. So again, we have archaeologists at the crash scene. And Doty said, John, this is the story. He said, John, I was shown both craft. Anybody with any kind of a brain could see that these two craft crashed together. The hole in one craft, the hole, the depression in the other craft. He goes, anyone. And then they said they showed sketches of that these two craft crashed together. He said they were egg shaped. Remember this. Doty said that the pictures and the report, they were egg shaped craft.
Mhm.
And he said, I don't care what anybody says. This is what happened. And he said, we believe that it was the electrical storm that caused these two craft to crash together, not some pulse weapon. And Doty also affirms that, to his knowledge, there were only two craft that crashed that night. And Doty says that it was not in July, that he is emphatic that these two craft crashed the same time, the same night, back in late June of 1947, not July of 1947, which many people think that it crashed. These crashed on July 4th or the night of July 4th. Doty is emphatic to say, and who am I going to argue with a counterintelligence agent that is briefed on these programs? I mean, and parts of his story, with the archaeologist and whatnot, I mean, just reaffirm. And he's like, John, don't let anyone tell you any different. They crashed in late June. It was an electrical storm. So that's it. And so we're about to go to press. I'm compiling the stories, and now somebody writes me, "Oh, you need to hear the Dr. Eric Davis story." And I'm thinking, is that the same Eric Davis, the Wilson Davis memos? Yes, it is. he talks about the Roswell crash. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
of course he did. This has got to further complicate my book, and we're going to delay the going to press. So we kind of stopped going. I self-publish this, by the way. People think that some random house, but I hired an editor who has a publishing company. I had to start my own publishing company, Red Dot Publishing. This is how you do it when you self-publish. People have asked me about that. And so I find the Eric Davis story. But before I do that, I call Leslie Keene, who is a contributor for the New York Times, who was very involved in the UFO phenomenon stories. I said, Leslie, is Eric Davis legit? And she's like, oh, absolutely. He worked for this. He, worked for the government, for contractors. John, he is completely legit. Okay, great. I've just sourced Dr. Davis. Let's see what he has to say. And he says that when he was doing a briefing, that he was also given a briefing and saw documents where at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, there is 10 velo binders. Velo binding is what Kinko's can do. It's plastic covers, and they kind of melt the spine together. They do this for movie scripts a lot. That's how I know. 10 velo binders of documents regarding Roswell. And the strange thing, once again, another crazy story that doesn't match up with some of the other stories, is that it specifically said two manta ray shaped craft crashed together at the same time in Roswell. There was metallic pieces on the ground. There were bodies, and oh my God, I'm trying to think of the one last thing that he said that but basically that these manta ray shaped craft crashed together. So now we have Doty who saw egg shaped craft, in the film, and we have people talking about a manta ray shaped craft. So again, I'm here to tell you, I don't know anything more about this than the day I started. This is how crazy this story becomes. Now, Eric Schratt, he is the ufologist. He does military aeronautical history. Forgive me, Michael Schratt, if I'm butchering your expertise. He um he is coming up with a story that says a warehouse worker in Berkeley, at the University of California, Berkeley, specifically says this flatbed semi tractor trailer from the U.S. Army was seen on the campus of University of California, Berkeley, backing into a warehouse, and under a tarp was this egg shaped metallic object. And the personnel person with Michael sketches what he saw. Now, I know, folks, this is crazy. Now, Linda Moulton Howe says, oh, you got to see this picture. And she's got a picture from downtown Roswell, 1947 in July, of a flatbed semi tractor trailer truck from the Army with a tarp, and underneath it is a highly polished chrome egg shaped object. Verified, put it in the bank. This thing was rolling down Roswell, and people have gone to people in Roswell to say they remembered this parade. So this bizarre parade of an egg shaped object, highly polished chrome, going down the middle of Roswell, New Mexico. And what's funny is, Ragsdale, Barnett, Anderson, they describe a muted stainless steel gray material. So, I mean, folks, I'd like to wrap this one up in a bow for you, but I just can't. But, because it's impossible. But I think that Doty's psychological disposition of his being furious with the UFO public for just, saying that he doesn't know what happened. That's like somebody telling me what they think happened a night that I wrestled, on ESPN.
Mm.
Who the hell are you to tell me what my
Right.
experience was? So I have to lend credit to Doty that electrical storm and two craft crash. That is about where I can, stop my claim of egg-shaped manta ray. Now, Michael Schratt, and I'll end here, says that when this person at Berkeley looked into the big hole, into this egg-shaped craft. He didn't see chairs, avionics, anything other than like another object, like the power source. And Michael Shred and I, this is interesting, kind of hypothesizes that is that maybe that egg shape was just maybe the power source that gets ejected before the crash or whatnot. Who knows?
Mm.
Because Eric Davis is claiming, no, these were manta ray shaped craft, but yet Doty and these other people are saying egg shaped. You know, we see the picture from Linda Moulton Howe. It's polished chrome. Other people are saying it's dull, muted, dull stainless steel. So that's the story. So I said, look, to not let anyone else go crazy in America looking at all these stories, let me just simply put these stories, into a book with a nice prose and eloquent, as best I can, eloquent writing, and to make it somewhat interesting for people to read. And that's where we stand. I have absolutely no opinion on the Magdalena crash, is much to the dismay, I'm sure, of many people, because it's one crazy story conflicting with another crazy story.
Yeah. How far away was Magdalena from Roswell in terms of like miles?
About 70 miles. And
Because you,
Magdalena was on the east side of the Luera, Luera mountains. So the coordinates people have given is the Luera Mountains, St. Augustine Plains, which is obviously the plains, and then to the north of the St. Augustine Plains is called Horse Peak. So you'll hear people talk about St. Augustine, Luera, Magdalena, Horse Peak. They're all talking about the
oh, the
same
same.
the same
So what was
locations.
this it was a mountainous area, obviously.
Yes, ma'am.
Was the crash uh buried in a bunch of forest? Like, because I'm thinking, here's the military dealing with Roswell. So you
Right.
would think they would do a flyover and cover a few hundred miles to see, if anything else is going on. Why didn't they spot the Magdalena crash? Was it buried in a forest? Like,
I love interviewing with you because you ask great questions. Now, Doty, who showed me the satellite photo, it's sand. Gerald Anderson said that there, and he gave descriptions of a type of bush that was out there. Gerald Anderson said that it was, thicket and bushes and sparse trees and but the Doty site was pure sand, and that is what's at the base, and that is where the rancher took his cattle up higher. That was the specific thing.
exactly.
He took cattle up higher to graze them, and that's when he came upon this craft. So uh, I can't answer why. I agree with you. You would think there would be numerous flyovers, but again, probably be the fact that it was 70. And again, I'm giving a generalized mileage estimate because I don't know either. So, we're thinking it's probably 70 to 100, 120 miles from the Corona Roswell area, and on the other side of the mountains. And maybe it just wasn't a geographic place that where they thought they should hone in on. I don't really have an adequate answer to that. And it is a great question. And again, brings up yet another inconsistency. Brody showing the photo, sand, Gerald Anderson saying, "Oh, no, 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 cottonwood," and there's a type of bush. God, I'm gonna find out what he said. A lot of bush, a lot of thicket. Said he actually came around a bend of some type of woods or forest. So just two again conflicting stories. I just I don't know if I'm ever going to solve this problem. Maybe I really don't want to or should either, but that's a great question.
Thank you. The other thing I find, it makes me kind of wonder, the pulse weaponry. I saw patents on the internet for pulse weaponry dating back to like the 40s. So the
So did
government,
I.
right. So the government obviously has been, creating this technology for quite some time. Maybe it wasn't a storm, because the storm thing makes you wonder, here you have craft, extraterrestrial craft from other galaxies, dimensions, and lightning storm knocks them out of the sky. I don't know. It just, pulse weaponry makes more sense to me.
Now I've had two people tell me that the storms were biblical. It was about 10 days worth of biblical biblical type lightning. And a rancher told me about a month ago, he goes, kid, if you ever come out to New Mexico, you'll see that lightning. You'll start to change your mind how bad it can be. So, and I've talked to other people that live in New
Yeah.
Mexico. I don't know either. I don't know what to tell you. Hey, internet
Yeah.
warriors, I don't know either. So, can I tell you something else? Remember, uh, you know, Tom Carey, they saw three objects. So we have Corona, we've got Magdalena crash. Now, the chrome object under the tarp on the flatbed, that was never described by anybody from the Roswell Army Airfield. I think they called them half tracks. This was a semi truck that kind of went down like this and was attached to a semi truck. Now, that was in July of 1947. My question is that a third craft that ended up in Berkeley that was hit by the pulse weapon?
Yeah.
And my head's, I don't want to confuse anybody more because I love your audience. I love you. But I mean, I'm thinking, wait a minute. No one ever described a egg-shaped chrome craft of the Roswell witnesses. Okay. Magdalena wasn't found in 49. What was that? What was that going through Roswell in July of 1947 that was egg-shaped? Was that the third craft brought down by a pulse weapon? Who frickin' knows? It just goes on and on. It's the folks, it's the state, it's when I finally published this book, I remember what Phil Klass, who was the famous UFO skeptic, had a newsletter, and he wrote right before he died, you could study the ufology your entire life, and on your deathbed, you will know less about ufology than you did the day you started. And I'm going to tell you something. As cranky as that guy was and as skeptical as that guy was, I'm starting to agree with what he's saying. I am starting to believe that I literally know less than I did 20 years ago, or certainly 5 years ago, meaning that I can't get a straight answer and a straight
Right.
story. And that is, I guess, kudos to the military, I guess.
Right.
But, you also have civilians that have, muddled the waters too.
Yeah,
There it
exactly.
is. That's
And
it,
now you
folks.
have all these congressional hearings where, our
Right.
politicians are doing this because they know it's the next shiny topic to talk about.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Sure.
So you
Yeah.
alluded to something in the beginning, um, that you said you might discuss with us. What was that?
Yeah. I'm going to be very careful just because
Absolutely.
I owe my sources this. And I want to be very cautious and tell you that Ross Coulthard is on this story, not on it actively investigating it, but he has been briefed by this insider also. And without going into strong detail, I think this is the story, the UFO. I think this is, and I'm not taking anything away from my Victor story because I have a video of an actual extraterrestrial, which is going to be more, if proven completely legit, is going to be more important than a photograph of the crucifixion of Christ, in my opinion. Take anything away from Christianity. But
Right.
I think might this might be the most important story since Roswell. There is a former defense contractor who is working for a defense contractor right now, who was with the letter alphabet agency that emailed me and Ross Coulthard uh, past week, 2 weeks, claiming that in the 1970s, now it's all very sketchy in my little noggin, so bear with me. That in the 1970s, Lockheed was given NHI, non-human intelligent craft, and this is what it was written. They successfully reversed engineered it enough to create their AVR, ARV, alien reproduction vehicle. That was this flux liner that I think the famous story, it was like at a trade show behind a curtain. Dr. Greer's told the story. However, through all sorts of means, they they manufactured an even more high-tech alien reproduction vehicle. Right. This is just what I was told. So afraid that this would get out of their control, they told the United States government, you know, that raft he gave us back in the 70s, can't do anything with it. I mean, we did that real basic alien flux liner. It's all we can go. This thing is so technically advanced. We just can't do anything with it. We're willing to give it back. Now, I don't know if this is true. Voluntary repossession. It's called in the car business. And the government said, no, 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 it's all right. And at one point, Lockheed in the 70s said, we have all this aircraft. We have all these helicopters. We have highly advanced radar that we're giving it to the military, but we have it before they do. What if we, uh, created a crash recovery team and tried to get some alien vehicles ourselves before the government got them? I'm just telling you what I was told. Now, I had a military intelligence insider said, well, that's not the whole story. Wait, you mean there's some truth in that? And he said, look, they they did come up with their own crash retrieval team. I'm telling you what a military intelligence insider told me, not this other guy, that yes, Lockheed came up with their own military crash retrieval team to get their own vehicles in case they crashed on, test flights. He said that at times the Lockheed team was merged or melded in with the JSOC team, the JSOC recovery team, Joint Special Operations Recovery Team. And hey, it's Jon Stewart. Does the story get crazier? Of course it does. Tell us more. So, I'm not being glib. I'm just, I'm laughing
Oh,
because I'm too old to cry. And that at one point in the southwest area of the United States, yesterday I found out it was a small town in Nevada. Listen to the bouncing ball on this one, folks. Lockheed, they're one of their alien reproduction vehicles starts to go off course, and the pilot is having a hard time navigating. They send the recovery team. I don't want to tell you where they came out of. They come upon the crash of the alien reproduction vehicle made by Lockheed. I want to be very specific. As the recovery team from Lockheed is ascending on this crash, you're not going to believe this. The JSOC team was tracking the alien reproduction vehicle because they weren't told by Lockheed that they were test flying this vehicle that night. Oh yeah, oh yeah. This is this
oh,
is not the leaker. This is a military intelligence source telling me the leakers are lying to you all. Firefight ensued. Now, again, folks, this is what I was told. A firefight ensued. One of the JSOC soldiers was captured, for lack of a better word. This hyped up Lockheed recovery team was gearing it, and it was taunting this soldier. This soldier actually ended up dying. So did another soldier in the firefight for JSOC, and that both of these soldiers were of Asian descent. Why would you throw that into the mix? Military intelligence insider said that, and so did this other defense contractor leaker. That it was two people died, Asian descent. This was 2004, a small town in Nevada. So I don't know if Ross wants to team up and investigate this. What is scary, folks, is that we have a corporation that's acting as its own sovereign country to some degree. Your own Air Force, your own military apparatus. Maybe I'm stretching it to some degree. It's this is not constitutionally what this country is all about.
right.
Rogue corporations, rogue elements of the government running amok, spending our money. Carolyn, you and I have talked a million times. If people think this is about aliens, to me, I knew there were other life form 30 years ago. It's about money.
Right.
I've been a hardworking small business person since I was 19, whether I was a professional wrestler, a bar dealer, in real estate, you name it. I have been working my ass off since I was 17, 18. This is about money. This is about my money, my friends' money, your viewers, your money, your tax dollars being pilfered and whittled away while minorities and people, impoverished people, are going to school, grade school hungry, being shot in their front yards, no after school programs, decaying infrastructure. What are we doing here? Stephen Greer said that we spent maybe $8 trillion since 1947 on this whole crazy phenomenon. It's such a hard pill for me to swallow. And so when I hear these stories of a rogue corporation and people being shot and the corporation not telling the military that they're test flying something, and so that's obfuscation, and I feel bad for the military because the military is trusting these corporations, giving them material, saying help us, and you take the material and abscond it for yourself and start to obfuscate our government and tell them when you're not going to test fly. I'm not chastising Lockheed to that to the extent where it's a criminal element, but it's criminal to some degree. And people are dying.
It doesn't
And this,
surprise me. It
no,
doesn't, it's a fascinating story, but it doesn't shock me.
no,
I expect that from our government. I mean, look at how many trillions of dollars we're sending overseas. And you're right, it is about money and it's about power, ideally.
yeah,
So, but that
and
is
that,
a
and that,
fascinating story.
yeah, and just to wrap up, that it's the insider who emailed me also said this is, folks, you're not going to believe this angle. This is the rub with the legislation right now in Congress. Three or four, he specifically said 3 or 4 senators know Lockheed has their own way high tech advanced craft and the other alien craft, and the government wants it back. They want their NHI, non-human intelligent craft that it gave to Lockheed. It wants to repo it. And
Right.
Lockheed's going, well, so this is, as he was trying to say, John, it's follow the money again. This is the rub.
Right.
The senators know Lockheed has it. They want the craft. They want the craft back. This is why of the consternation in Congress. So take that, folks, as whatever you. But this is what I've been dealing with for 5 years of these some of the stories that people tell me.
Wow. I wish I could be inside your head for like 10 minutes.
God help you.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Of course, I'll have where folks. Now, I know your book's on Amazon and it's also in other book retailers as well, correct?
I don't, not yet. Did you just, it's strictly right now with Amazon.
Oh, I thought I saw
Um,
it somewhere
Now,
else.
Amazon might have partnerships with other outlet.
Oh, that's
I
it.
am not I'm not privy to that, but yeah,
Okay, but
Magdalena,
Amazon
the
is the
second Roswell
place, right?
crash.
Amazon's the
We've got it really cheap on the Kindle version, just because. Hey, I know people work hard if they can't afford the book. I really wanted to kind of blow it out on Kindle, just so at least somebody that can't afford it could at least afford the
yeah,
$2.88
yeah.
on Kindle. And people, and of course I got made fun of that. Oh, it's too cheap. No, I want to have everyone who wants to read this have the ability to at least read it, at least electronically. So
That's really
yeah, so if you
nice.
can go there and people, and again, I hate to say this because I eat my words, but anybody that has any other information, please reach out to me. I answer all emails. John Allen Stewart at AOL.com. And I'm sure, Carolyn, you'll put it up
I will,
on the screen.
absolutely.
And yeah,
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Of course, I will be in touch with you again. I love
yeah,
speaking with you. It's always a pleasure, John. And keep us posted. We want to know what's happening. Like if you uncover any additional, of course, information, I guess you'll reach out, right?
yep, yeah. 2024 I hate to sound 2024 is going to be my year. This, there's so much stuff building up and so many phone calls and so many inroads as far as conferences and documentaries and other things shooting out from the documentary. And I think it's going to be the year of the ufologist, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope I can participate in that with everyone, because I cannot wait to just get this over with. And
I
I mean
know.
that sincerely, and get this over with, get this whole documentary thing and the whole Victor saga, give it to the public, and let's move on, and finish this story. And that's what we have to do as Americans. We have to demand that this story, the UFO phenomenon, seeks its logical conclusion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You tell it one of the best ways that I've heard. So